Hey everyone, how's it going? And welcome back to part 4 of this hands-on with Maxon C4D level up workshop. My name's Ellie and I'm joined once again with my good friend Matt. How's it going, Matt?
Hello, it's going well. Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm very good. Yeah. Part 4. I can't believe after
I
today.
know.
It's only 2 more weeks. So it goes so quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Like time flies when you're having fun. Like it doesn't seem a week ago since we did this already, but
I know, it's crazy. And also, I wanted to say hey to everyone who has said hello in the questions area already. So, hey to Bernd, hey to Mimo, Hannah, Jay, Uriah, Ronnie. Nice to see you guys. So, yeah, let us know. Give us a little hey in the questions area. There should be one inside of GoToWebinar inside the UI for you to just let us know where you're from. Say hey. It's where you can drop in the questions throughout this whole workshop. Me and Matt always keep an eye on that. So, we've got a bunch more people. Honar, Jamie, Samir. Hey guys, how's it going?
Inigo,
So for
Charles,
anyone,
Joe, Dave. Way, they're all coming in.
I know. I feel like sometimes we have to commit and we have to then say hey to
I
everyone,
know.
but we love that you guys say hey to us. It's really nice. So for anyone who is maybe new to this workshop, the idea is it's going to help boost you guys as Cinema 4D artists onto the next level of your 3D journey inside of version 26 and also Redshift 3.5. So me and Matt broke this down into what we thought were 6 really interesting topics, especially when it comes to kind of looking at that next step up inside of Cinema 4D. So we've already done parts 1, 2, and 3, and yes, don't worry, they were recorded and can be found on the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel. And part four today, we're going to be looking at working with motion, and we're going to talk about what we're going to do in today's session. But if you want to have a check out of what's happening on like all of the individual sessions, so if you want to know what happened in parts 1, 2, and 3, or what's going to happen in parts 5 and 6, inside of GoToWebinar there should be a handout section, and it actually has an entire course guide which has just a list of the topics for each of the individual sessions for you to have a look at. So really quickly, some extra stuff. We won't go into too much detail about this because, you know, I love to repeat myself every single week. So I'm sure you've all heard this before, but these sessions are recorded and you guys have permanent access because they do get uploaded onto the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel. We have a particular playlist. So this entire series is called Hands On with Maxon or How Maxon. And we have a playlist where we upload all of the How Maxon sessions and they're not going anywhere. So don't worry. You also have full access to all the project files. And so there are a couple already on for this week, but I believe me and Matt have actually been doing some different stuff. So Matt, I know you've been doing a couple of different Vertex Map things today. Maybe we could throw them on there. And I've been doing some other fracturing
Oh
ones. So
yeah.
maybe after the session we can chuck them on as well if you know you want to break those down and make it useful to follow along.
I
Also, I was going to say, also, a bunch of you have been applying for the Maxon trial extension. We should now be up to date. If I haven't responded, the chances are because everything's good to go and it's been extended. If I have, it's because either there hasn't been a trial activated or we can't find your Maxon account. So do make sure that you do those things before you email us. Make sure that you, one, have created your own Maxon account and you've activated the trial of 26, and it's going to be a Maxon One trial. That's what we call it. And then let us know, the email that you've actually registered under, and then we can do that for you. And for anyone who is perhaps new to this workshop or any of the sessions that we do, we love to make it as interactive as possible by doing live Q&A throughout. You have the luxury of having both myself and Matt here. So between us, hopefully we can answer a bunch of your questions, whether it's live in the session, if it's to do with the topic that we're covering, or just in the background. That's totally cool with us. We don't mind. And one final quick thing is if you do like to share your work, we love to see what you guys are creating, whether it's to do with this workshop or just to do with anything in kind of like the Maxon world in general. Do let us know by hashtagging our very own hashtag, HowMaxon. And yeah, we keep an eye on that, whether that's on Twitter or on Instagram or any other socials. And again, all this information, so course guide, links, project files, etc., can all be found in the handout section of GoToWebinar. Cool. So a little session plan for what we're going to be covering today. the whole idea is working with motion. And as many of you know who are already maybe motion designers or artists, motion graphics and motion design is a very broad topic, and especially inside of Cinema 4D, there are a variety of different disciplines and topics and tools that we could cover. In the beginner's workshop that can be found on the training team YouTube channel, we've already covered the main MoGraph tools like the Cloner. We had a kind of a little look at the Voronoi Fracture. We looked at working with effectors and a couple of fields on kind of like a introductory base level. And we also had a week where we looked at animation, so keyframing, and we also looked at an initial look to dynamics. So we thought, because this is a level up workshop, me and Matt were like, hey, what are some really cool things that we could look at that we haven't necessarily covered? So we're going to be covering Vertex Maps. Vertex Maps are unbelievably powerful. They can be used to control different growths. They can be combined with MoGraph and fields. They can be combined with displacement. They can trigger dynamics. We can use them to control texture effects. And so we thought that would be a really interesting topic to cover during the whole kind of idea of motion design. So Matt's going to be guiding us through a whole bunch of different ways to understand and set up Vertex Maps. Then, as you know, we like to kind of do a, I mean, to be honest, this whole thing is going to be practical, but we like to then kind of do a practical side of it. And so then I'm going to take over and we're going to create a flower growth animation. And it's basically going to combine everything that Matt's going to show us with Vertex Maps and fields with things like MoGraph, cloners, and effectors. So we're taking it like motion design a step further by looking at combining different disciplines and different tools inside of Cinema 4D. And then we're going to look at the Voronoi Fracture. And I know we already sort of like covered it a little bit in the beginner's workshop, but there are so many things you can do that we didn't necessarily talk about. So detailing, changing sources, having a little bit more art direction control. And then we're going to combine that, as we said, you know, combining these tools is a big thing for today's session. We're going to combine that with MoGraph, and we're going to use a sort of different techniques and fields to then trigger dynamics to create like a cracking effect, and then maybe a little bit of MoGraph selections if we have time. And again, we're going to create a ground cracking animation, and we've actually got two different types that we want to try and get to. So as you can see, we've got a whole bunch of stuff to get through today. But if you want to know more about the MoGraph Cloner and effectors and fields, or animation and dynamics and keyframing, just let us know in the questions area. We can link you to those sessions. They are hands-on sessions again, so they're 2 hours long, full of so much information that we're perhaps not going to necessarily cover today, because we're, you know, as we said, taking it a little bit of a step further today. So with all that being said, I guess it's time to like get started and hand it over to you. Is that right, Matt?
Yeah, that's fine. Let's take a look at
Wonderful.
what
Let me
vertex maps
just...
are and how they work and what they do.
Yes, let me just chuck this over to you. And yeah, let us know, guys, any questions you have on anything, whether it's to do with Vertex Maps, or it's to do with MoGraph, cloners, Voronoi Fracture, a topic that we're not even covering. We should have hopefully some time today to go through a bunch of your questions. So yeah, make sure you fire them our way.
Cool. Right. Okay. So we're talking about vertex maps. Now, what is a vertex map? Well, in front of you is an example of a vertex map, and there are various different ways to create them. But a vertex map is basically well, I'd like to say grayscale, but it isn't really. But it's a valued scale between 0 and 100% against points. And as you can see from my example here, it's valued between 100% being yellow and 0% being red. And vertex maps can be used for a whole host of different things, for showing where you can put textures, for showing where you can have hair created, for showing where cloners can do stuff, for showing where textures can be altered, for adding where deformers can work. When we were looking at soft body and things like that, you can have a vertex map to define where stuff is springy, where stuff isn't, so you can have flexibility where things need to be. So a vertex map is a kind of colored representation of 0 to 100 where you wish things to occur, to be affected, to be changed, to be different. So I'm going to show you a few different ways that you create vertex maps and how they can be affected and added. And then Elly's going to largely put those into practice and see how we can use those. Some we're not going to touch on today, but they will be setups for next week. For example, like the question, is there a way to blend materials using a vertex map? Yes, and that's what we will be looking at next week. So let's have a look at how to create a vertex map and what we need to do in order to get it going. So I've got a few examples here, but let's just create a brand new scene, and I'm going to create myself a plane. Vertex maps need to be on something that's editable. So that's the first thing. That's something that we need to be aware of. So in order to create vertex maps, I need this to be an editable object. However, it's not got a lot of points. So I want to increase this dramatically before I make it editable. So I am going to make this 100 by 100 segments. So you can see that gives me a lot of nice new geometry to play with and give me a vertex map. So then I have to make it editable. Boop. So now I have points. I have points that I can select. And I'm going to select one single point over there. Or maybe I can select it in the middle. Maybe I'll select the middle one just for fun. And what I'm going to do, I go to my select menu at the top, and I can set a vertex weight. And I press that button, and a little pop-up says, what weight would you like to set this as? 0 will be red, 100% will be yellow. So let's go 100%. And if we zoom in, I need to have my vertex map selected. If I zoom in, there we can see I have my point at 100%. And if you wanted to, I could have done something else. I could paint a selection and do it, which is easy enough to do. But at the moment, I've just got this single point. You know, let's just show that as an example. So if I go to my selection tool, I go to my points, select my object, and I go I can do the same thing. I can go to my select, I can set my vertex weight, I can choose 100%, and now I have those selected. So it's that easy to kind of create vertex weights. And in all honesty, until the creation of fields, this was pretty much all you could do. And that didn't really excite me greatly. So to be honest, I never really used vertex maps. You could create them, they were static, they did this. Huzzah. Great, so what? Then we had the, you can also press invert as well if you want to, so you can see the other side of it. But what you can also do, what really made life really interesting is, let's go back to my selection, and I'm just going to select 1 in the center. And I'm going to recreate my vertex map. There probably is ways to edit these, but I'm just being lazy. I can select my vertex map, and I can select use fields. And this now opens up a whole host of different new fun things that I can play around with. For starters, even basically just the freeze. So this basically says, what happens when you press play? Nothing, it freezes as is. This is your vertex map freeze. I can change that really quickly to just grow. And if I press play now, my vertex map grows. And this means that I can have effect over materials, bumps, displacements, you know, all sorts of things that this can have an effect on. And its growth, speed, and radius is controlled by stuff down here. So I can choose 5, so it isn't quite as aggressive. This is how far away stuff is that it grows. And you can lower your strength as well. So you'll see that things aren't quite so aggressive in how fast stuff moves out. I can choose 25 here, and things will grow out quite fast because it's expanding 25 centimeters from each point. If I lower that to 15, you can get different effects and different speeds that things take. So let's lower that to 10 again. And it's growing much more slowly, much more gradually. So it hasn't completed the entire thing by the time my 90 frames is over. So there's quite some flexibility in this just from creating a single point at 100%, and then it grows that 100% out. Okay, so that's a fairly simple setup that just enables growing. Now, what about if we want to control where this goes instead? So let's get our plane, let's make it 100 by 100 and make it editable. And then let's get my, oh, I need it on point mode, don't I? Go to point mode. Let's set vertex weight. Oh, look what I've done here. I've not selected anything. So I don't have a point selected, which is fine because I don't want to set any particular point at 100% on this one. So I am setting that all of my vertex weights are at 0 without selecting anything, which you can do. So I just press 100% and everything is red. Okay, there is no yellow dot, there is no starting point on this one. Everything is red. Why would I want to do that? Well, let's go to fields and let's add a spherical field. Boop. Yay! I can, ooh, no, not move the whole plane. I can move my field around and control where my vertex map has got its created, is created, is adjusted, is affected using this. And even for things like jumping up and down, going through, creating stuff like that, which is quite nice. And because my spherical field, has a size, I can increase and decrease the size in that. I've even got remapping. So I've got inner strength and outer strength. So if I want to increase the gradient between what is 0% at the edge and 100% in the middle, I can adjust the inner offset. So I can have bigger effects. You can see that's very kind of pixelated because it's then resorting to the polygons that are there. And I can increase and decrease that width and inner strength and outer strength and stuff. So if I never want it to have a 100%, if I only ever want it to have 50, I can adjust all of this with the remap, which is really funky to do. So I can have quite a nice amount of control over the vertex map itself. Let's just kind of reset that. Boop. There we go. And of course, because it's fields, I can change that from a spherical field if I want to, or I can add a box field in as well, and I can control that, and I can add them, cross them, multiply them, subtract them if I wanted to. So my box field could come in there and create some really interesting shapes and do things. And you've got all of the power of fields to adjust the vertex map, which is this is where, like I say, the fun of vertex maps really came into effect when we had the ability of affecting them with fields. Otherwise, it was useful, but it was nowhere near as easy to set up and nowhere near as powerful. You can even combine things that we learned last week. So let's get rid of my box field and let's get rid of my spherical field. And let's create, of all things, an emitter. An emitter, you say? Yes. Because what we're going to do is let's whack the size of this up so that it matches the size of my plane. I'm going to lower the number of particles because I don't want it to do that many, so just one. So it's just going to go boop, boop, boop. Maybe I want a few more, or maybe I want faster speeds. Let's try 2 every. Yeah, that's going to be quite cool. But why an emitter? What's that going to do? Well, with my vertex map, I'm going to get rid of the freeze for the moment. I'm just going to drag and drop the emitter, plop. And it says, okay, what do you want me to register this as? A particle object or a point object? And I want to register it as a particle object. And you can see instantly where there is one of my particles happens to go through, it's gone yellow. So if I just go back to the beginning, you can see that I've got pop, pop, pop. I can create some really interesting effects by using an emitter and having the particles land. Well, they go through. So if I increase the radius, you can see, look at that. That makes a really interesting effect with stuff kind of popping in and popping out. You can have this kind of do all sorts of weird and wonderful things, depending on what kind of effect you wanted it to work with. Now, in theory, I should also be able to make that stay there. And so with my emitter selected, I need to add back my freeze plop. And I need to give it a max. Although you can also cheat. Actually, one of the things I found, which I quite liked, was grow. Oh, I need to have it below. Yes, sorry. Orders matter. And oh no, I've done. What's my brain doing? I don't want remapping. I don't want freezing. I do want it to freeze. And I want it to max out. Sorry. Blending. Maxing out is quite cool, but let's change that back and get this not to grow, but just max. Oh no, I did try it. Sorry, my thing. Great. If I nip that at 0, there we go. That's what I wanted. So, as you can see, there are a lot of different effects, a lot of different things that you can work with. So, just reiterating that, I've got my emitter, which pops stuff up. I re-add my freeze, and to my freeze, I change it to grow, but I'm actually going to change the effect strength to 0 so that it doesn't grow very far, and I need to add that to max. So it maxes out where the stuff grows and keeps it there. So it'd be quite an interesting thing for raindrops, changing textures and things like that. But the fact that it uses these as well is quite cool. And if you wanted to, you could, give it like give some more interesting growth out there, just like little bits, so you get slight different changes, which is a kind of really, really nice and funky way of having different materials or different effects or different deformers do things. Okay, so we can continue to add to that with another example, which I made here, using deformers. So let's actually do a practical example of using a deformer and a vertex map. So how did I do this? Well, I got my plane, as you'd expect. I did 100 by 100, and I made it editable. And then I thought to myself, well, I need a font. So let's create some text. And I needed something to go around. So because I want a path to follow, that's what we're going to do. We're going to use a field. Let me show you the example. What is actually happening here is I'm having the word hello indented into my object using a vertex map and a displacer. So it gives them the nice impression that something is quite literally making an impression. How did I do this? So we have the vertex map. I had a word and I think, well, I can't, if I was to use one of these as a path to follow, it would just be following the outline, and that's not going to be very helpful for me. So I changed the font to, ooh, where did you go? There's a dancing script somewhere. Yep. And that gave me something that I can basically draw out using my spline tool. So just very quickly, I'm going to draw the inside of this as kind of roughly as I like to give the impression of handwriting And you can see I'm not being too particular, but I can at least go round and join stuff up. Which I thought actually was quite a nifty little way of getting this to work. So then I go up, and then I come back round, and I go up and round and round and out. And there's my spline. So I can turn off that one. And in simples, I've got that. Of course, if you've got a graphics tablet and can be bothered to do it that way or do it by hand, then you can do this. So let's get our effector, which actually will be our field, won't it? But we can come back to that and add it in so that you can see it doesn't matter which order you do these things in. So under my not effectors, I need fields, sorry. I need a spherical field, and that spherical field is way too big to do this. So let's shrink it down. And then a spherical field with animation stuff that we did before, tags align to spline. And then that says, hey, what spline do you want to align it to? And I say the one called spline, and then it fixes it there. At the start of my animation, I want it to be position 0. You can see that I can scrub this along for those people who haven't done this before, and I can press that button, which gives it a keyframe. Now I'm going to make my animation about 200 frames longer, because otherwise it's going to write it super quick. I'm going to make sure my animation is at the end at 200, and then I'm going to make sure this is then at 100%. So effectively, I am saying be 100% along the spline by frame 200. And then that gives me a nice movement around. Now, there are some caveats with the way the stuff is created, and we will come back to that, and I will also show you how I fixed it. So at the moment, we don't have, obviously, a vertex map. So let's select my plane. Let's go to select. Let's go to set vertex weight. Let's go to 0%, 100. That's fine. And then I'm going to say use field. Boom. And then I'm going to drag my spherical field in there. Okay. So now if I press play, you can see that it's drawing my spherical field on, but it's not staying. So as we did before, or just, you can see that with this one, my vertex map stays after it's written. Okay, it's a bit slow because it's thinking about it. So let's have a look. Let's go back to ours. We want to max that out. Ooh, I didn't mean to delete that. We can average that. And I also want to max that and max that. And then.
Hey Matt, while you're doing that, we've had what I think is quite a good question from Charles. He was wondering,
Okay.
for a vertex map, do the fields process top to bottom or bottom to top? I think that's a great question.
That's a very good question. Do you mean here?
Yes. So what is the order? Because we're used to like objects manager, aren't we? Where things take priority at the top.
I'm trying to think actually.
So I believe it works like Photoshop layers. So it's going to be doing the freeze first, and then so it knows to then do the growth, and then when your spherical field is then interacting, it's then going to do that, and then whatever you lay on top of that based on your blending modes.
This is the blending mode of what is below. Yeah.
So it's
so
bottom.
That would be normal, and then that would max out. If I change it to average and then I press auto update, we're going to see what happens. Now it gives me a lovely magical feel, but it doesn't obviously keep my lettering where I need it to be. So I want to lower my radius to 0, and you can see that now it sprays it on, which is quite cool, but it's a bit jaggedy, and it's also not giving me a very even flow. And the even flow is actually to do with the spline and the number of adaptive points. So how far it's got to travel around and how quickly it glances over everywhere. So I'm going to change that to uniform, and hopefully we will notice a difference as it draws across, which is great, and it does, and that's much better. The problem I've now got, or I think, is that the edges are a bit jaggedy, so it doesn't give me a nice, gradiated effect to the edges. And the reason for this is the vertex map and the way it's understanding the points. But we can change this and we can cheat it. But it does require you to rename this. So let's go to the basic map and let's call this start. I then need to create a new vertex map. Yep, I need to create a second one on the same object. So set vertex map, create 0. And in this vertex map, I actually need to call this one blur. This will help. Use fields, and in this one, I need to drag and drop the other one. Oop, missed. Plop. And you can see that my blur one, oh, I've got one sentence, one, is now not blurring because I need to make sure that one is after the other because of the way it processes, and set this. It's already on average. It should be able to do it. What am I doing?
Yeah, so I think if you just control the radius in the average, so in the blur vertex map,
Yeah.
which should be the second one, if you increase,
Select
in
layer blending, average. Oh, no.
so drop down that start for me. Where's the vertex map? So have you drag and dropped the first vertex map into there?
Yeah. So that's my first one, called start. And in blur, I drag and drop. Boop.
Yeah, so click that start and then mode to average. So in the layer.
There we go. I was on the wrong one.
No, sorry, in the layer tab.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
scroll
then
down.
mode to average, and then
That's what happens
decrease.
when my window isn't big enough. There we go. Now I can see all of the options. That's it. I need a bigger monitor. And you can see that we can control the width and how much it blurs. Thank you for that. I was like, it was there earlier, and because I
No worries.
changed my layout, wasn't it? And it gives you a little bit better blurring around the outside. And we can still, change the spherical field size as well, which will give us possibly a bit better. Oh, no, it's not doing anything at all. Okay, now I'm really confused that this isn't.
Go into the freeze on the second one.
This all worked earlier. Like I did it first time, and then.
If I were you, I would delete all of that, re-add the
Yeah,
freeze, because the freeze can sometimes. I think the first one would have been okay, but on the second one.
Yeah, I'm determined to do this right. So select set vertex weight 0. Okay. Change this one to fields. Add the spherical field in. Bing. Change the freeze mode. Grow strength 0. And this will give me something that doesn't stay. Or is it that needs to be 100? And okay, this is very strange.
I mean,
Normal,
I
average.
wonder if it makes a difference. Does your spherical field need to be a child of your plane?
No,
No, it shouldn't make a difference.
but that needs to be the other way around. Strength 100%. And grow. This is trolling me.
Hmm.
As you can see here, from one I made earlier, it's absolutely fine.
Try blending modes to max instead of normal.
Yeah, so they were 2 maxes, and they were max and normal.
Oh, that did something. Whee.
There we go.
All about the blending modes, guys.
So many finicky things. And then we do our second vertex map. So this one, it's all about renaming as well. For some reason, we discovered that. So this is start, and then select the plane again. Tools, set vertex weight 0, which you didn't action. Thank you. Set vertex weight 0. Okay. There's the second one. This one we call blur, use fields. That goes in there. And then it was down the bottom, layer, average. And did you grow a bit? Did we grow a bit?
I think this might be the blending again.
Ooh. So these need to be really normal, max, mode, average, 0. Okay. Do I not have freeze? Did I delete the freeze? No, freeze is there. Oh, I've got 2 of them, that's why. Ha! Well, this is going well.
So I tried clear the freeze because it sort of there's a little clear button on it. To clear that, and then there we go.
There's an auto update button as well that I use that gives us some use. So start, average as well,
yeah,
and then lower that
reduce
dramatically. Otherwise, we're getting too much. Sorry, that was a bit more of a faff than it was expected to be. So there we go, we've got it. And what's the purpose of this, I hear you ask? Well, with a deformer, there is a wonderful deformer called Displacer, and in there, funnily enough, we can use fields. And the field that we're going to use is the one that we've created called blur, which means it will only have an effect where that vertex map occurs. In order to get the deformer to do something, we need to go to shading, we need to add a color in, and just white would be fine. And then let's make sure that we've got some change of some sort. So I'm going to hide the spline. And at the moment, nothing is happening. So let's have a look at our displacer. It's field, it is using the blur, it is using an average. The shading is color. and now it's not using it. This really isn't going very well.
Make the displacer a child of your plane.
Oh, of course I am. Yeah. Yay! I've been thrown, haven't I? So, oh dear.
People are saying
mistake.
that it's good to see all of this stuff, and Joel was saying it's good to see the determination and how people correct these mistakes, because we all do these things all the time.
Yeah. So rookie mistake, that one actually makes a child, actually make the former a child of it.
It's sometimes like the simplest things are the things that get forgotten. Like for me,
that throw us.
So yeah.
So we can, you can whack that down ridiculously if you want to, and it's going to make some quite, harsh things. But if we put that in a subdivision surface, for example, oh no, you can get some smoothing. This is going to be absolutely insane to do, but there we go. Yeah, I don't like that. Let's turn that back off. Make the displacer. I think my -5 that I used earlier was enough to kind of give you that swirl. But the problem sometimes seeing this is simply light. So you can just change the angle, get some decent shading, and at some point we will also show you how you could possibly change that to be different textures. So there you go. Sorry for that. That was more convoluted than that needed to have been. But you can see the interesting effect that this does actually have on the displacer, and the fact that it's controlled exactly where it is. And that is slightly longer than intended, Vertex Maps.
No, that was great. That was great. So Joel was wondering, how did you connect the Vertex map to the displacer again?
Okay, so in the displacer, you have an option to use fields. So you can say, what field do I want to use? And that includes, like the normal fields, like the linear field, the spherical field, and things like that. But you can also drag and drop the vertex map in there. So just inside the fields, you've got the vertex map, the standard one, which is a bit too jaggedy, and then we've got the nice blurry one. So inside the displacer, under fields, drag and drop the vertex map in there, and then it will use that.
Cool, thanks.
That's all right. Anything else?
Having a look. No, I think you got to most of them. There was a little one earlier relating to setting up Vertex Map for use with hair, or
yes. In theory, you can do the same thing. You should be able to do it effectively the same way you're about to, with what you're about to show, I believe. So I don't want to steal that thunder.
Yeah. Oh, one final quick one, just from Andres. I missed the part where you attach the spherical field to the path with the tags.
Okay, that one's fairly easy to go back through. So I have a spherical field which I can move around and do stuff with. There is a tag under the animations. So my spherical field tags, animation tags, align to spline. And this align to the spline then has a tag section which says, which spline do you want me to align to? And that's the one that I created, the spline. And then you need to control and keyframe its position. So its position is 0% across, and I can use this little slider to move it wherever I want it to be. But I can just keyframe it by pressing the keyframe button at 0% at frame 0, and then go to the end of my animation, change that to 100%. Ooh, I could do 200% if I wanted to go all the way around. 100%, re-keyframe, and now if I go back to the beginning, it will follow that spline all the way around, linked to it. Cool.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, just a couple of questions about changing the color. And yeah, so next week, that's going to be a very big topic when we do working with color. It's going to be Vertex Map color, MoGraph color, color blending, all those fun things. That's what we're going to be doing.
Sweet.
Okay, shall I steal the screen?
Yes. Do you want, if you're stealing it, or should I throw it to you?
I am easy, whatever is best.
Okay, I shall throw it. There you go.
Cool, there we go. Cool, can everybody see my screen? Standard question.
Yes.
Yes. Cool. Well, thanks for that, Matt. Yeah, that was, I especially loved like the raindrop one. Like that just makes like my creative brain go, oh my God, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do stuff with textures. So yeah, I'm looking forward to, progressing on that one next week. It should be fun. Okay, cool. So yeah, my plan was to basically show a practical version using Vertex Maps and how we can combine it with some of our MoGraph tools. And effectively, we're going to create this growth. As you can see here, we have the yellow areas where we have our grass and flower clones, and we have the red area where we don't have any. So if we just sort of like play this through, I've got it going as quite a slow animation. But yeah, hopefully you guys can see it's kind of just like growing and they're scaling up and they've got this little like kind of springy wobble to them. And yeah, it's just about how we can combine a whole bunch of different techniques here with Vertex Maps and create some quite interesting results. So let me just move this thing out of the way. So yeah, let me know if there's any questions on stuff like this, or if you've had any thoughts on this type of design. We absolutely do have the time to cover things like that. So really simply, I just pulled in a stone from the asset browser. So if we go into the asset browser and you go stone, we get these like really cool looking stones. And all I did was dropped it into a remesh to get a nice quad remesh, which looks something like this. And this is going to help, as Matt was saying, with our Vertex map and our growth, because it looks at the subdivisions, it looks at the points, all those things really make a difference to how our animation is going to look. And you know what? I'm not really fussed about subdivision surface, really. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set up my Vertex map, and I'm going to set up my Vertex map growth just like Matt did. And then once we have that, that's when we can start to use it in different ways, like in displacement, or in our case, in a fields menu for MoGraph clones. So what I'm going to do, as you guys know, I like to be a little bit lazy sometimes. So I'm just going to grab a selection to start my growth. So instead of having to animate in a field or animate anything from happening, I'm just going to create a selection of points I know aren't going to be visible, so I can get away with it. As Charles says, it's my creative laziness, and I like it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come into just like an area that I know is not going to be in shot, grab a point, a couple points, let's just go with one for now, and then go to select and then set vertex weight. And I'm just going to set my value to 100, and everything's going to go bright red apart from this tiny little dot here. This 1 point has gone yellow. And we now have my vertex map tag on here. So I can now start to set up my vertex map and set up my growth. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to check this use fields checkbox, which is a super important thing. So it knows to then use fields with my vertex map. And by default, we have our freeze in there. Wonderful, thank you. That is exactly what I needed. And so it saves me from making one. All I need to do is click my freeze, and then I need to change my mode, as you know, Matt has just shown us, to grow. And I can't see because of my GoToWebinars in the way. Let's move that out of the way. So set this to grow, and all of a sudden it's gone, well, it's expanded out loads. And that's because our radius, or my radius, is set to 10. And so it's initially looking for points within a 10 centimeter radius. And this is quite a small setup. So just for the purposes of, answering a scale question, this is your default cube, which is 200 by 200 by 200, and this is sort of the size of my rock, just to give a gauge as to the scale that we're working in today. Goodbye cube, we don't need you anymore. Right, let's get back into here. Okay, let's get back into here, zoom out. Right, so we don't need our radius to be this big. Maybe, can we get away with 1 centimeter? Let's see. Nope. Okay, 2 centimeters we can get away with. Wonderful. Right, let's get that out of the way. Let's give ourselves a couple more frames on our timeline to play with. So for anyone who doesn't know, this is your timeline down here. And if we adjust this number here, we can increase the amount of frames in our, in our scene, in our viewport, in our animation effectively. And it's just not gonna, what's nice is my scene isn't gonna kind of go back to the beginning and reset all over again after 90 frames. It's gonna just carry on playing. And we want that. We want to have a little bit more time to play with, so it's not too quick of an animation. So as we can see, this is sort of growing along and it's looking fine. If we find this is all happening a little bit too quick, which I think it is, we can adjust our effect strength, and I'm going to do that and see where we go with this. Okay, cool. So we're getting a slightly slower animation. Even then, you might find that you want to adjust and tweak these settings, and this is all down to you, and this is your whole creative thing. You can have it as quick or as slow as you like, whatever you think is working for the type of shot you're creating. Okay, cool. So the one thing I don't like really about this initial setup is the growth is very, I don't know, uniform. That's probably the best way of describing it. So it's all happening at the sort of the same time, the same speed, and the same amount of strength. But what if I wanted to add some variation? And so as we can see on this final one, this entire rock doesn't end up going like yellow. It doesn't end up being completely covered. And so what we can do is we can actually take advantage of our fields for this. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to throw in my random field, and we can see what it's doing. We can already see that noise pattern. And this is where our blending mode is super important. What we want it to do, just like in Photoshop, we want to be adjusting this to overlay. And so now as you play this through, we can see we're getting this sort of really nice looking noise random growth. And what we can do, we can increase and decrease the scale of this. So we could have it maybe up to 300%. So we'll have these this sort of larger noise pattern occurring. As we can see, we're getting some of these red areas remain, and we can always come in and we can make some different adjustments. We can adjust our remapping if we wanted to. So we can I control my inner offset? Is that going to give me what I want? It's going to give me less of what I want. What do I want to do? Maybe I want to do this. And no, we have nothing. Okay. You know what? I'm going to leave it as it is because I don't want to spend too much time faffing with just this noise pattern. I'm happy with it. It's looking okay. It's giving me a couple of red areas, which is cool. That's fine. So now we've set up our vertex map growth. This is when we can then create or set up a MoGraph animation or a MoGraph design, and we're going to use the cloner for that. And we're basically going to clone a whole bunch of grass and flower elements onto the surface of our rock. And so you could think of this in any way. This could be grass along a landscape. It could be, I don't know, abstract spheres or particles across text. So it doesn't just need to be considered as this animation, because the setup is exactly the same for whatever you want to do, really. So let's do that a bit. Let's just switch off my random field, so I don't want to see that in there. And let's come into our asset browser and let's find some stuff to clone along the top. So if we come over here and come into, what am I looking for? Plants, grass elements. We'll go low res just for now. And yeah, we have a whole bunch of different grass elements here. And my only kind of little tip for this particular setup. So if you're sort of creating grass or flowers or like trees in a forest, variation helps to sell it. So if I just cloned the same one grass element over the top of my cloner, it would look fine. We can still add some variation to it, but it's not going to be as it's just not going to look as perhaps realistic or aesthetically pleasing than if I cloned like 12 different things across here. It will look nice and it looks super different, which is kind of the effect we want to go for. And I'm going to drop in some little like flower elements as well. So we have these little dandelions, and let's just grab a whole bunch of these different grass elements. So I'm just going to download these assets. And so, you know, there's not a max or a minimum. Let's just go with this. And did we get 04? Let's go 04 as well. Okay, cool. So what I am going to do, so if I just hide my stone, we can see all of these little elements in here, and I can close my asset browser. So we have all these little guys in here. What I'm going to do, purely for the sakes of this, I'm going to convert my dandelions into a like a single object. And what's good, it's still going to keep all of my polygon selection tags, so I can remain in control of all of these different textures, which is handy when it comes to, you know, converting them or creating them in Redshift. So I'm just going to do the same thing, connect objects and delete. And what I'm going to do, actually no, we'll do that in a minute. So all we're going to do now is we're going to clone these elements across the surface of this rock. So the way that we can do that, the way that we can clone things just very, very quickly is by using a MoGraph tool called the MoGraph Cloner. So as you know, as we said at the start of this session, if you do want to know more about the cloner and how it works on a kind of introductory level with effectors and fields, then just let us know, and then either myself or Matt can link you to that original Hands-on with Maxon workshop where we spend 2 hours going over MoGraph and in particular the cloner. So this is our cloner. The way that we clone different elements is you just have to make them all a child of the cloner. So I'm going to grab all of these different elements and I'm going to just drop them into the cloner. And if I sort of like pull out, you can see that we actually have some different clones here. And so what's happening is, because our mode is set to grid, we have a 3x1x3 grid of some of these elements. But the thing is, we don't want that. We want them to be cloned on the surface of an object. So all we have to do inside of our cloner, inside of our mode, set our mode to object, everything's going to disappear. But we now have this object menu bar, and it's just saying, hey, what object do you want me to clone these elements along the top of? And that's going to be our stone. So we're going to drop in our stone, and they're now being cloned along the surface of our rock. They're looking a little bit strange, and that's because we need to just fix some of the transform, and I believe it's not that one. There we go. So yeah, just need to, you may need to adjust the rotation of your objects. More often than not, it will be -90 in here. And as you can see, we now have them all across here. One thing I am going to do, I'm actually going to scale all of these down because they are way too big. So all I did was highlighted all of my elements, held my T key and just pulled my mouse across just to scale everything down. Okay, so you're probably thinking, Ellie, it's looking a little bit bare. It's looking a little bit bare. There's not really a lot of elements going on, but that's fine because we can fix that quite easily and quite quickly by going inside of our cloner, inside of our object. We can adjust the count. So at the moment we only have 20, so we can see that we're not covering this very well. I'm trying to think, what do I want to go with? Let's go 5,000. Okay, so we have 5,000 clones going on. As you can see, it's actually starting to slow down my viewport a little bit. So maybe we'll go 4,000 just for the sake of this session. Okay, so now we have a lot more all over here. But again, they're looking a little bit uniform. So what I tend to do is I tend to adjust my sort of clone mode. So at the moment, what iterate means, or iterate, is it's going to go down this order and it's going to clone one of them, the next one, the next one, the next one, and it goes back to that order again. And because of what we've done, you can't really tell that it looks random, but what we can do, we can actually set it to random, and it's going to be even more of a random pattern that maybe our eye won't be able to notice. So we can change this to random. And what's nice about this is we can then control the seed value. So if we say, okay, we don't really like that, there's too many of this one or too many of that one, we can adjust our seed and we can find a nicer result that we're happy with. So this is going okay for now. But again, we don't have that much variation in size or rotation. So we have some variation in the elements that we're cloning because we selected, I don't know, what, 10 or something different elements here. But how do we add some more variation to kind of help sell this a little bit more? Well, because when we're using a cloner, we have what's called MoGraph geometry. When we have MoGraph geometry, we can then use MoGraph effectors and fields to create different types of effects. So if we have a look in this menu here, we have some different effectors that do a wide range of different things, from controlling animation with sound, randomizing a pattern, pushing them apart, pushing different like cloned elements apart so they're not interacting with one another. And then once we do that, we can then use fields to define an area in which this effect does or doesn't happen. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to use a random effector. So the important thing here is I need to make sure my cloner or the particular MoGraph generator is selected. Then choose my effector. In my case, it's going to be a random effector. Everything's going to go a little bit crazy. And that's because by default, in my parameter of my random, we have our position being affected. So what's happening is it's randomizing the position of each of our clones from a value of 0 up to 50 centimeters on the X, Y, and Z axes. We don't really want that. We don't want the position to be affected because we want it to grow along the surface of our rock. So switch off our position and they will go back to normal. And then what we can do is we can adjust things like rotation and we can adjust scale. So we can just enter some different values in here, maybe not too much in there, but this one's going to be like the main one. Maybe go like 180 on that one. Not that one. 180 on that one. There we go. I'm going to do a value of like 5. Just so now they're a little bit more random, a little bit more varied. And then we can also control our uniform scale. So by default, you can control scaling on the X, Y, and the Z axis. So we could have things be taller, we could have them be wider, have them be deeper. But for this, because I don't want to be creating any stretching, I'm just going to go to uniform scale, and therefore it's going to look at it as a whole and transform it and scale it up as an entire object. And then we could do a value of maybe, we don't want to be too crazy with this, do we? 0.3? Maybe 0.4. And so now we have a lot more variation going on. So we've varied the elements that are being cloned, we've varied their rotation, and we've also varied their scale or their sizing. So all of this stuff comes together to really help kind of like sell this animation a little bit more. So cool. We've got this done, but let's go back now to our vertex map. And remember, at the very start of this animation, we set up a vertex map growth. And the reason for that is because then we can now combine the vertex map growth with an effector to then make it look like this effect, or these clones or these bits of grass and flowers are being cloned and growing over the top of our particular object, which in our case is a stone. So how do we combine all this stuff together? We know the vertex map can be drag and dropped into the fields menu, but what do we need to do to set this up first? And the way that you need to think about it is the effect that we want is we want to make the grass or the cloned elements look like they are appearing. And so in my head, I'm thinking, okay, well, if I scale them up from 0% to 100%, they're going to look like they're growing. And so we can use an effector that can scale something up from 0 to 100, and then the vertex map goes in that field. So in that case, what we're going to do is I'm going to select my cloner, because again, it's important to select our MoGraph generator before using our effectors. I'm going to come in and I'm going to grab what's called a Plain Effector. And a Plain Effector is going to allow me, if I switch off my position, so my default settings, is going to allow me to scale everything down uniformly again by a value of -1. And so if I scale something down by a value of -1, I'm scaling it down by 100%. So great, okay, cool. I have now got all of my grass elements to effectively disappear by scaling down. And so if I then adjust my strength, you can see that they are almost growing based on their position. And if this is what you want, cool, we could keyframe the strength. But as we said, we want to use our vertex map to control this growth. So what we're going to do, we're going to come into the fields menu of our Plain Effector. This is where it's important. And then all we have to do is drag and drop that vertex map that's holding and containing that growth information and that sort of like vertex weight, and drop it into here. Now, as we press play, as it plays through, we can see that we're getting the opposite effect to what we sort of really wanted. So if you wanted to, get rid of clones this way, but if you find that your vertex map weight is the wrong way around, we can really, really easily fix this inside of our fields menu. So inside of our plane, because this is the thing that needs to be sort of changed. Just above our vertex map, we can drag in a modifier layer. So again, we've already been looking at the freeze modifier layer. Just below that is something called an invert, and it's going to invert the thing below it, which is the vertex map weight. And so now you can see, if I click my vertex map, it's inverted this information. So now as I play this through again, we're getting what we actually originally hoped for with our grass elements sort of growing or scaling up across our stone based on our vertex map. Okay, so I'm not too fussed about having that play through because I've got quite a large number of things going on. But the difference now is if we sort of like come back into here and I play this one through, let me just sort of click off that. Hopefully you guys can see that there is a bit of like a wobble that happens to our clones as they're being scaled up. And we can create this effect really easily using another effector. All we have to do, come back into our main scene. Again, make sure our clone is selected. And then there's an effector called the delay effector. And if we come into our effector tab, we have a mode and we have a even, a blend, and a spring. If we change it to spring, it's going to almost sort of create like that effect where they're sort of like scaling up a little bit more than 100%, and it comes back down, and they have some positional and rotational movement and sort of bounce going along. So let me just sort of increase this strength value, and then I'm hoping we'll be able to see if we play this through that we're getting. So this is a little bit exaggerated just so we can all see the effect, but that's because the strength is set to 75. So they're sort of growing, they're getting bigger, and they're going back down to their normal size and their normal position that they should be in. Cool. So do we have any questions on any of that?
We do. We've got a few. The most asked one at the moment is, where is the tutorial on how to use the cloner? So I'm just sort of saying that if you guys look at the handout that is in GoToWebinar, you will be able to see that it takes us to our Maxon training team. We've covered the cloner in a few tutorials, so there isn't a specific one to point to exactly. I mean, we looked at it in the first session of this series, and we looked at it 2 or 3 times, I think, in the R25 one,
Yeah,
because
so
it
I
pops
think
up
so I've
in
just got the
modeling and motion graphics and things.
yeah, so I've just got the Train Team YouTube channel. So this is the Maxon Train Team YouTube channel that we have. And if you come down to a playlist called Hands On with Maxon, which is where you can find, you know, this workshop sessions. If you just click on that and scroll all the way down, there is a C4D R25 beginners workshop. And this one here goes into quite a bit of detail about the MoGraph tools, so the cloner, and then combining the cloner with effectors and fields. So this is probably the one that I would check out first, because it's the same kind of format as the ones that we're doing now. And then, yeah, if you want to know more, there are a variety of other sessions on here that go through a lot of things to do with MoGraph.
Cool. We have a question from Thomas. Can I make several plane effectors, one for scaling and one for Vertex Map? But I'm not sure why you'd need to create the plane effector for the Vertex Map.
So so the Vertex Maps, if we look at our Plain Effector, so let me just get rid of my delay. So the Plain Effector is what is controlling the scale. So if I switch off my Vertex Map, which is in my fields area, the Plain Effector is what is controlling the scale. So we can see that by reducing the strength. So effectively my Plain Effector is now off. So everything is set to its 100% scale. And then we can use the Plain Effector to then control the scale. And then what the field is doing is the field is like a fall off area where this Plain Effector is having an effect. So if I then switch this on, this is where this is having the effect. And so we can show this if we switch this off and I drop in like a spherical field, the field is where the effect just is or isn't happening. So unless you would like to do something different, if so, let us know, and then hopefully we can help answer.
Cool, thank you. We've got another. A few people have said that this is a really fantastic technique, so thank you, Hannah, for that one. And also that using the delay effector to create the overshoots is a really cool way of, you know, giving that sort of extra over anticipation of the thing. So that one's really nice.
Yes, overused
Question.
effector for me. Yes.
Ooh. Can you have opposing vertex maps creating different elements from the other side of the rock and stopping when they collide?
Oh my God, that's such a great question.
In theory, you could cheat it. So you would have 2 vertex maps, one that starts at one side and one that starts with the other.
Starts at the other. Yeah.
They would have different elements connected to the vertex maps, but the only thing that you could do is when they got to the middle, you would have to have a field that was negating the effect. So you'd have to kind of have like a fake blocker so that you fake where they meet because you couldn't predict it.
Yeah.
That's the only way I could
do
think that
it?
you
Should
could
we
do it.
look? Okay, so let me, most simple way possible, do it with a plane. Okay. That should be enough points. Let's do it one corner to another. Okay, so editable. Oh, I always love doing stuff like this. Right. So this is going to be my first one. It's going to start on the left-hand side. Set vertex weight, set to 100. Yep. So
Yep.
let's say vertex map 01. Use fields, and then have it grow. Okay, but then I need to then make it stop as it gets to here. So I could then do, I mean, I've done this in a really horrendous way, haven't I? Okay, so now let me see if I can. What would it be? Subtract. And then like rotate it. Which way is it going?
Ooh.
Why is it going? What? Is it me or is that rotation really weird?
Yeah.
Okay, normal. There we go. Okay, well, normal seems to be. It seems to be fine. Okay, and then. Oh, it doesn't like it at all now, does it? Okay. So how can I get it to stop there?
Well, you. Oh, hold on. Can you go to the freeze?
Mm-hmm.
You can animate the effect strength. So you could keyframe it at 100% and then the next frame keyframe it at 0 so that it just stops growing.
But then I'd have to time it perfectly, wouldn't I? So like there.
Yeah. The only other way is to have I would then have a linear field that is on minus the other way around.
Oh,
So
okay.
you want subtract. Well, I was just going to say turn it around, or a cubic field that would be on that, but it would do the same thing.
Okay, hang on.
So you're limiting it inside. Okay, that's cool.
Okay, okay.
That's so interesting because it's completely the other way around to the way I would have done it, but does exactly the same thing.
Okay, now I just need to do
The same thing the other way around. Yeah.
the same thing. But then I'd need to, so grab this point. Can I then set vertex weight again? Okay, let me see if this works by duplicating it.
Oh, good question.
And then this is always fun. And get rid of you for now. Okay, that was a mistake.
There's a lot of interesting suggestions as well. Like, can you do this with a linear field? Can you blend Boolean two different answers? No, I don't think you can blend and Boolean. Ooh.
Okay, so this one still has that
No.
on. And this one needs to
Be 100% and grow as well.
Yeah, but that one didn't really like that. So let me try get rid of that.
Someone said, could you use channels on the Vertex map? But I don't think we've got channels, have we? So.
Oh, I just deleted my little point here. Right, so that one's there, that one's there. Let me get my freeze. Grow. Doesn't like it, does it? Spherical field just to fake it maybe for a bit.
Why is that one not working? You should be able to set this from 2 different points.
No.
Okay, now I've got to figure this out as well.
Okay, here we go. I think I got it. I think I got it. I think I got it.
So then that stops
The
there.
sheer excitement of watching this work is very satisfying. Okay, so I need my linear field again on here, but I need the other way around, don't I? So let's go linear field. And that needs to be rotated this way. So I'm sort of like half faking this. Okay, so then this one should go and fade out. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And this one should
go to its same point. So in theory, they clash. So it's faking it, but I think it's the only way you could do it, because you can't have any real interaction between vertex maps because they're not real, I suppose, physical.
Yeah.
But that's the way,
Kind of,
that's one
yeah.
of the ways that we could do it, yeah.
That was a very fast way. I'm sure there is a better way. Anything else?
No, there was just a lot of suggestions on how we did this, which was quite interesting.
Yeah,
People thinking that we might do 5 different maps, linear field to multiply. How about gradient field, adding a random field over a box so that there's some churn in the middle, so that there's some overlapping stuff.
Oh yeah, there would definitely be ways of making it look more of a blend. Oh, I want to have a think about this now, but maybe not on a live session. I would.
Yeah,
a bunch of people
something to think about for color, maybe.
Yeah, maybe I'll have a think, because then you can get 2 textures then
Overlapping and merging. Yeah, that would be cool.
But I mean, you could do that on the
Cool.
same vertex map.
Yeah,
okay, cool. So at the risk of spending too much time on this, let's move on to doing some stuff in the Voronoi Fracture. So let me, you know what, I'm just going to get rid of these because we don't need these open. And then this one here. Oh yeah, so the first thing I did want to show is when I come into here. So yeah, this first fracture setup is based on a piece that Studio Tendril created for ESPN, and it was on the Maxon 2021 reel. So I want to quickly show it, if I can find where I downloaded it to. Here we go. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see this. We won't be able to hear the audio anyway, but it's going to be this very first section. It's very, very fast. So I'm going to play it through once and we'll go back and we'll play it through frame by frame. So keep an eye on this fracturing. So that is the first bit. So we can see here we have, so if I do my little frame by frame, this bit here where it sort of cracks through from the left, and it's just these particular pieces and they kind of come up and they're all dynamic. I thought this was really cool. I really love this bit. Like the whole piece is incredible. And I believe a lot of it was done in Houdini, if not all of it was done in Houdini. And so I thought, wouldn't it be fun to take advantage of this motion session and try and recreate something similar with you guys? So this is what I ended up creating. And I mean, it's pretty close. And what's nice is it's not like a crazy advanced setup. So this was just sort of like a still from it. We're probably not going to worry about texturing unless people would really love to know, then I can show it. But for now, let's focus on how we actually set this up. So yeah, I had to just kind of shout out Tendril and ESPN and credit them for the inspiration for this, and you know, the whole aesthetic. So let's create it together. So what we're going to do, we're going to start off by creating, we sort of have a look in here. We have like an under layer, and then we have a top layer on top that's being fractured. And so this is what we're going to set up first of all, really simply by using cubes. So I'm going to grab myself my standard primitive cube, and just for the sakes of this, let's switch off our work plane. So feel free to follow along with this. I will try and go at a pace where we can all follow along. If you miss something, just let me know, or let Matt know, and we can reshow it. So all I'm going to do is squidge this down so it's a bit more of like a floor. So I'm going to change my size on my Y to 2 centimeters. And then we're going to say this is going to be our static floor. And I'm going to duplicate it by just command clicking and dragging. And this is going to be my cracking floor. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to move this up 2.1 on the Y position. The reason for that is because I know it's got 2 centimeter kind of height. So we now have this going on. So this is our kind of the start of our setup, and you can already start to see this is how we're going to look down, and then we're going to create this cracking. So what we want to do, we want to now fracture or break up this top sort of like floor cube. And the way that we do that, so again, we're going to be diving into another MoGraph generator. So I'll go into a bit of detail about the Voronoi Fracture. However, again, check out, I think it was the exact same session, wasn't it, Matt? The MoGraph one that we went into the Voronoi Fracture. So the one that we just showed earlier goes into this in a lot more detail as well.
Yes.
Cool, thanks. So
Right.
the way that the Voronoi Fracture works, much like the MoGraph Cloner, where we had to put the elements as a child of the MoGraph generator, we have to do the same thing here. Because I want to crack this floor, all I need to do is make it a child of my Voronoi Fracture. And then now we can see that we actually have separated this floor up, or this cube up, into a bunch of different fragments. And so if we just sort of come down and have a look at some of these settings, let's have a look at the object tab. So inside the object tab, we have a couple of different settings. We have the option to colorize or not colorize our fragments. And so what's nice about colorize is we can see our fragments really, really clearly inside of our viewport, whereas like this, we can't necessarily see them that well. We can offset our fragments, so I can start to pull this value in. So if I just switch off my static floor for now, you can see that we can offset these a little bit, and we can create some really nice looking patterns. We can even invert this, so we can then get the inverted version of those offset fragments. And then we can also do something called hull only, which if we sort of like come in, hopefully you guys can see, there we go. We just sort of have like an outer area, and then we can control the thickness of these fragments as well. So we can do some really kind of interesting stuff just with those settings alone. But I'm not worried about those settings. I want to take it to the next level and do some more fun stuff by combining this with dynamics. So how do we get some more fragments? Because the main thing here, if we're sort of looking at this design, is we have quite a few fragments, quite a few pieces going on, and they're also focused in this middle area. So what we can do, when we come into our sources tab, we have something called a point generator, and this is generating these little green dots here, which in turn is creating our fragments or our fracture pieces. And the idea is the more points you have, the more fragments you're going to end up with. So if I increase my point amount to something like 600, we can see we have a load more points, and therefore we have a load more fragments. We can control our distribution type, which at the moment it's set to uniform. So it's uniformly separating and spreading our points across the surface of our particular object, which in our case is our cube or floor. We have normal, where it's gonna, as you can see, it's really kind of clumping into the middle area of here. And we have a standard deviation, so we can pull this out or we can pull this in and really start to pull these points in and really define where these fractures are happening. And so we can already start to get an idea of what we may want to create. So we have exponential, which hopefully if we have time, I will show later on. But for now, I'm just going to leave this on uniform, because I think that should be fine. But at any point we can change these, and we can also add distribution sources as well. So one thing, you know what, let's show this anyway, because I don't think I'll have time to show the third example. So what we can do is, if, for example, we set up like a normal distribution type and we sort of pull these in, we can control the transform. So the transform, even though it's not like dropped down, is so powerful. It's such a powerful setting. And so what we can do, I can actually transform this point generator distribution, and so I can start to pull these points up and down, and I can pull them along. And so now what you can see is we have most of our points and most of our segments pulled into the center area, which would be great for this type of design. And then what we can do, let's say these are, so I'm not going to go with this method, but I wanted to show it because I think it's a really cool thing. So this would be our small fragments. We can then add a second distribution source. And let's say these are like our big fragments. We can do a similar kind of thing. We can change our distribution type to normal. We could increase our points, and then we could pull this so it's a little bit wider. And so now what we have an area in the middle, which are our small fragments. And then as we go further out, we have big segments. And what's great about this is if we created like an impact animation, and so something hit or we animated the middle part to break up, you would naturally want them to be smaller pieces, and then the further away you get from the impact would perhaps be larger pieces. And so we can begin to really define the look of our fragments purely with just controlling our different source elements. Let's say goodbye to these and just add a default source again, and let's go 600. So we're back to where we were now. Do we want to go 600? Maybe we want to go 800 or 700. Yeah, let's leave this. I can always change this later on. Okay, cool. So now what we want to do, we want to actually create this cracking. And what I thought was really interesting about the particular animation is it happens from left to right, and it's almost as if something is pushing them along. And so what we could do, we can actually use fields to create this effect, but it's not going to be as realistic. So just for the purposes of showing, because the Voronoi Fracture is a MoGraph generator, we can therefore use effectors and fields. So what we could do is we could use a Plain Effector, which is going to push everything up on the y-axis. So it's going to push all our fragments up. But at the moment, it's doing everything. So it's having like 100% effect on all of our pieces. And so what we could then do, we could then use a spherical field, for example, make it like a bit smaller. And then our spherical field is now controlling where this effect can happen. And so we could create a similar animation by using fields and animating sort of like the way that they come out. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to combine this with dynamics. So rigid body dynamics in the bullet dynamic system in 26. And that is going to give us a more natural and realistic looking cracking effect. So if we get rid of our effectors, because we don't need those, what we're going to do, we're going to set up some dynamics. Let me put my static floor back on. So we're going to set up some dynamics. And so really briefly on a separate window, let me show you about how we can combine dynamics with Voronoi Fracture. So if I grab myself a plane, this is going to be the most basic dynamic setup you have ever seen, plane and sphere. Not very interesting, but it will help to demonstrate. So last week we learned about simulation, and we learned about the tags that we need to control our simulation, whether it's cloth, whether it's rope, whether it's colliders. Well, for anyone who has worked in Cinema 4D before, or especially kind of the previous Cinema 4D version 25 and beyond, inside of simulation tags, we used to have rigid body and soft body. Now these are in our they're now referred to as bullet dynamics. So that is the system that it uses as opposed to simulation. And so this is where you can now find your rigid body dynamics and your soft body dynamics and the collider that you need for them. So if I want this sphere to become a rigid dynamic object that's going to be affected by gravity, forces, and physics, I can apply a rigid body tag to it. It is now a dynamic element. That means when I press play, it's going to interact with gravity and physics. I would like it to hit my plane and not fall straight through it. And therefore, for that reason, I need to come back into bullet tags and set a collider to my plane. Because if I set a rigid body to my plane, it's going to fall through. Everything's going to fall out of the sky. So now if I press play, we can see we have dynamic elements. If I then grab my Voronoi Fracture and put my sphere inside it and move my tag onto my Voronoi Fracture, we now have our pieces as dynamic elements. So we're now going to do this on our other scene. So the main thing we need to do here is on our Voronoi Fracture, we want to right click, we're going to go to bullet tags and we're going to go to rigid body. On our static floor, we need this to be our collider. And if I press play, you might notice is it actually dropped down. So if we come into our Voronoi Fracture and turn off colorized fragments, if we come in here, I'm hoping you guys can see, it might not be super visible, that we have some cracking going on already. But we don't want this. We want our cracking to happen over time. So we want it to sort of occur from left to right and then sort of be triggered by a particular thing. We don't want it to be triggered straight away. So the way that we can do this is we can actually use another collider object, which we could then animate, and then we could animate that from, let's say, left to right, like we need to do, and that is going to work and trigger our dynamics and trigger our fragment pieces, and it's going to give that same effect from sort of like left to right cracking. So let's do this. Let's set this up. So let's switch my colorized fragments back on so we can see what we're doing. And for this, all I'm going to do is just use a slightly misshapen sphere because it gives that nice sort of rounded effect. So as it moves through, it's hopefully going to look like a similar type of animation, similar type of collision. So I'm going to grab myself a sphere, make it smaller. Wonder how small we need to go. Maybe go with that. And I'm just going to increase my segments purely for the sake of it, because I'm going to make it editable, which means I wouldn't be able to in the future. So to make this editable, because what I want to do, I want to squish it down and sort of like smush it in a little bit. Those are my technical terms. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hit the C key, and that's going to make it editable, which is also this button down here. Once it's editable, I'm now able to scale it and squish it sort of like this. Cool. So from here, if I sort of pull this down, what I can do is I can animate it from left to right, and I'm going to have it as a collider object, and so it's going to trigger our collisions and our dynamics as it hits these individual pieces. So let's just go onto our sphere, go onto our coordinates, and all we want to do is control the position on the z-axis. So on frame 0 of my timeline, I'm going to hit a keyframe here because this is where I want it to start. And then let's say on frame 45, I then want it to be here, hit another keyframe. So we now have our 2 keyframes. So now as I play it through, it's going to be coming through like this. What we need to do is we now need to set up our dynamics on our sphere as well, because as we can see, nothing is happening. So I'm going to right click my sphere and I'm going to add a collider body. But what I also want to do is inside my Voronoi Fracture tag, so inside of my dynamics tag in here, I need to change my trigger to on collision. And so what that means is, so at the moment it's set to immediate. So as soon as I hit play on my animation, my fragments, my Voronoi Fracture are automatically dynamic, and we're getting that cracking at the very start that we don't want. We want the cracking to be coming from the sphere's collision. So if I change this to on collision, now as you press play, the sphere is now creating and causing this effect. Okay, so from here, what I would then do is I would then hide my sphere. So if we hit these little traffic lights up here, if I go to view, icon size large, you guys can see it a bit clearer. So now this effect is happening. If I carry on playing, what you'll notice is we get some sort of like jiggling and some movement occurring, which we actually don't really want. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One of the reasons, if I highlight all of my, if I just go into my collider tags, we have some bounce and friction and collision noise. And so these are a slightly simpler version of the settings that we looked at for simulation in like cloth and rope, when we had we had some bounce and friction inside of those as well. And so what I don't want to have any bounce, but I do want to have some friction. And we're going to do the same type of thing inside of here. So this is going to help a little bit to sort of like hold things together and prevent that movement, but we're still getting some jiggling and some movement here. So this is where we can control our project settings. So if I hit Command D, inside of my bullet tag, inside of my expert, we can control some of these different settings. They're going to do a bunch of different things. So our collision margin and scale are important when we look at the scale of our dynamics and our objects. And so the trouble is, this is quite like a small setup. So these are quite small pieces. So I'm going to need to adjust these settings to compensate for that. If I had a larger scene with really large pieces, I would have to do the opposite, and I'd have to have a larger scale. So let's just reduce these down, because I'm working at what, roughly 10% of a normal scale, like a normal Cinema 4D scale. And then we have our steps per frame, and then we have a maximum solver, which are similar-ish to, you know, these sort of sub-steps and iterations that we looked at during last week's. So let me just double these, and then I imagine this should fix any issues. So as you can see, it's a little bit slower in performance, but we've prevented any of that additional movement or jiggling, and we could take it a step further if we wanted to. But for me, this is working absolutely fine. So let's now switch off colorized fragments. Okay, so we could even if we don't want these areas to be affected, we could use MoGraph selections inside of here as well. So if we come back and we go to MoGraph selection and sort of increase this, we can grab like a whole bunch of these points, and this is the area that's going to be affected, right? So these are all like the MoGraph clones that are going to be affected by the dynamics. So we now have our MoGraph selection. So all we have to do is drop this selection inside of here. So hopefully it's a bit more noticeable now that only this area here is being affected. So beforehand, we had some different like fragment pieces up here and down here. And if you don't want that, MoGraph selections are a really great way of selecting MoGraph clones or MoGraph geometry or elements, in our case, particular fragment pieces. And then you can use those in a variety of different ways. In our case, we used it by saying, okay, we want only this MoGraph selection, only these particular fragment pieces to be affected by the dynamics. So it gives us a bit more control of perhaps what we want to do. Sorry, I'm being wrong. Good timing. Yeah, so MoGraph selections work in that way. And there's one more thing I did want to quickly show inside of this setup, and that is our detailing tab. So if I come a little bit closer into here, what you guys can probably notice is these pieces look really, they look really kind of like sharp and they look flat. We don't have a lot of variation or noise going on the inside. And if we go to our shading lines, we can see that we don't have a lot of we don't really have many subdivisions going on at all. But inside of the Voronoi Fracture, we have something called detailing. And so we can enable detailing. It's going to go a little bit crazy. And so what we want to do, we want to adjust our maximum edge length. And this is going to control this area here. And so remember, we're working in a smaller scale. So we're going to want to adjust these settings to compensate for that. So if I don't want to go too crazy, let's go maybe to like 3, and it's going to have a little think about it. There we go. So we have a lot more subdivisions going on, but we're starting to get some crazy little issues going on. And there's a couple of ways we can fix this. So one way is we can do a noise surface, and it's going to do an artifact prevention strength. It's going to try and prevent some of these issues from happening. But the main reason that this stuff is looking the way it is because of inside of our noise settings, our noise strength is set to 20 centimeters. Our fragments are very, very small. So maybe we want to, go to, what do I want to go for? 5? Okay, yeah, that seemed to work pretty well. And our global scale could maybe go to 100. And so now we're getting some better looking pieces. So we may even want to make this a bit smaller again. And so now if I switch off my lines, we've created this sort of distortion and this noise turbulent effect on the edges of these fragments that makes them just look a lot more realistic when they break up. So if we sort of come into here, and then you can sort of see how as they break up, they look like more like realistic pieces of like fragment or rock or whatever, as opposed to those really sort of flat lines that we had before, and that sort of non-noisy effect. The only thing I would say as well about this, when you add detailing, it's going to be adding more subdivisions, more polygons. And so if I now play this through, it is going to be quite a bit slower because it's trying to calculate this detailing, the dynamics and the Voronoi fracture. So what I would say is if you are going to use detailing, do everything that you need to do, and then as you come to render or as you come to then your texturing, I would then enable your detailing then ready for your final animation. What else do I want to show? Okay, do you have any questions on that before we have a little look at something else? A similar kind of thing. Let me have a look. Matt, you there? Is there a way to add custom displacement without ruining the plane mesh for all breaks?
Hello?
For example, in mesh would be realistic to have more broken
Can you hear
crumb.
me?
Is there a way to add custom displacement? So, yes, there is a way of adding custom displacement. However, I wouldn't recommend it because then your fracture pieces then won't fit together. So I would advise doing,
Hello?
if you want to have the detail, is to use the detailing as opposed to using displacement, because you add displacement, especially on the inside areas of the fragments, before they're like actually fractured or separated, they're going to look separate because displacement affects like the look of geometry. A workaround could be sort of one, detailing naturally, but there is also a way inside of the Voronoi Fracture, if I just switch off my detailing for the sakes of this, inside the Voronoi Fracture, there is a way of using selections to control where your textures are going to be. So what we can do is we can actually say, okay, we want our inside faces to be a particular material. So what you could do is you could add bump, because bump is like a fake surface effect, onto the inside of them, and that's going to help, you know, sell a more detailed effect. And then you would have a separate material on the outside. So that's actually what I ended up doing on here. So if we just wait for this to load, if I just switch off my detailing, so this is the original project file, and if we sort of play this through, open up our render view. Okay, of course that happened. Okay, so we don't need the render view to show this. And so on my Voronoi Fracture here, I've got my inside faces and my outside faces, and I have a material. I have different materials set up for these different pieces. So I can show it on here, actually. This will be a better way of showing it. So as you can see, on the inside of my fragments, I have this rock texture with a little bit of like a gold tint. And then on the outside, I actually created this Maxon sort of concrete logo effect. So yeah, that hopefully that answers that question.
That's good. Am I back?
You are, yes. Hi.
I don't know what happened there. I was happily talking to you, reading out a question, and then you went, "Oh, okay," and then read out the question. So
Yeah, I was
my
gonna
mic
say,
was on.
I literally couldn't hear at all. So I was like, I should probably say something.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I disconnected my audio and reconnected, and everything seems to be fine. Sorry about that. Happily talking to you, and then apparently no one could hear me. Um, yeah, we've got quite a few more questions, which is quite interesting. One of them: how did you manage to keep the painted texture with the Maxon logo on only on the bits that break apart?
So this is a very good question. So what I'm going to do, so because my thing is being a little bit annoying, I'm just going to quit out of this because I want to be able to actually show this entire thing. Let me just reload this. So yeah, if anyone ever gets that error in Redshift, so where it's like you've not got enough VRAM, so far the only solve I have is restarting Cinema 4D.
Yeah, sadly at the moment that's the only one I know as well.
Yep. But hey ho, it doesn't take too long, as we just saw. So yeah, let me switch off my detailing because I'm not too fussed about that for now. And I'm going to let it load and do its thing. Okay, so I created this texture. Do I have it on my Photoshop? I can't really see my Photoshop very well now. Okay. Yeah, so basically I created this texture inside of Photoshop. I've got a PSD file that is just either a transparent background with this logo that I created and drew, or you could create a background of like a grey material. Keep hitting the bottom. And then it is this texture here. Let's open up our render view so we can actually talk about this in a bit more detail. So yeah, this is what it looks like. And if I open up my material, so do not be alarmed, we will go through something like this next week. So we have this Maxon logo texture, and if I just solo this texture, this is all it is. So this is what we have, and we've thrown that into our, I threw it into a color correct, and I threw it into a standard material here. And then what happens if you then drop that onto the object that that's being fractured, and then we sort of play it through, the texture will stick to those particular pieces. And that's pretty much all I did for this one. So I can actually package this up and put it on the project file link. It's not actually on there yet, but yeah, that's how I did that. And then yeah, using those selections, just like we were talking about, I can now show the different materials. Now we have this texture on the inside. This is our base texture, and then yeah, this one here. And what's great about PSD files inside of Redshift is if I come into my settings, I can actually take a particular layer out of my PSD file and use that inside of Redshift. So I could use like masks, I can use alphas, I can use backgrounds, I can use different logos and stuff by just dropping in the PSD file.
I actually didn't know that was a thing. That's cool.
It is. It's very cool. Maybe I'll show that in a bit more detail next week when we do material blending.
Yeah.
This doesn't actually blend
Quick
any materials
question.
together. Yeah.
How do you bake, or how can you bake the dynamics so that you can scrub backwards?
All you have to do is go into your dynamics, into cache, and then you can bake all or bake the object depending on what you want to do. I won't do it now, but yeah, it would then calculate the cache, and then I'd be able to scrub back and forth through that.
Which is cool.
Do it as an alembic.
Yeah, that's another way. Bake it out as something.
Bake it out as an alembic,
keyframe.
which would also work.
And a super quick question, or someone has said, how could you add smaller fragments and dust? Dust, I would say, is most likely you're going to need to do with some form of post effect, because it's like to calculate that in Cinema on top of this may be crazy, and dust would be easier to do. However, the smaller fragments, I know in your other setup you had used a plane to determine where that you had even finer fragments as well, so that you could have an area that has smaller fragments that break apart nearer the area and bigger ones outside.
Yeah, so that I would just use the sources and controlling, what am I looking for? Cube. So yeah, controlling the sources to get even finer results. So let's say this is like your basic setup. Inside the sources, inside of your point generator, this is where you can start to have smaller and bigger fragments. So if I said this is going to be my tiny fragments, and let's go like 1,000. I mean, we could even go like even more, depending on your distribution. Like for me, if I was going to do this effect, I would do, maybe normal, squeeze them in, just sort of adjust this scale a little bit. So we now have like these teeny tiny ones are now right inside here. We then add another source, which could then be like our medium ones. So then that could be a similar type thing. We maybe go 600, go normal again. Let me just pull this out so I can see what I'm doing. Pull those wider, pull them in a bit. And then we could add a final one, which could be our large with a capital A. And then we go like 200, maybe even 100. And so now we have inside of here, we have full control. So we have our teeny tiny ones, we have our medium ones, and then we have our large ones that all come together to then create this type of thing. So hopefully that answers your question. That's what I do.
That's the nice way, so that you've really got this, like the smaller fragments where the thing is closer to what's causing it, and then the bigger fragments out and out. It's really nice that you can control the different layers inside of, you know, a single Voronoi, which is quite cool.
Yes. And there's also, so just a quick, so this is one other thing I did want to show that I'm not going to have time to show, but it sort of like follows on from that a little bit. It uses the exponential, where you can have a particular sort of like axis affection. And so what I did was, what do I want to do to show this? If I colorize my fragments and we go back to the beginning and sort of go get my render view up. So yeah, we can see we have more of our fragments. If I switch my area light off, I would see it's a bit clearer. There we go. So we have more of our fragments on the what's like the front face of this, which actually is our z-axis affection. And so we have these like smaller areas. And then what I actually did, this is something I did want to show. So Pixel Lab created this tutorial where they combined the Voronoi Fracture with Vertex Maps. I thought, oh, that's really great for, you know, the purposes of today. But then there's actually a way that you can create a same type of growth effect by using fields to trigger that. And so this is what I did here, was that it creates like a growth, and then that growth controls the dynamics of the Voronoi Fracture. And then if we have a look here, cool, we have this type of thing. So what I might do, I'll drop this project file on there as well for you guys to break it down. Effectively, what we're doing is we have our Voronoi Fracture fracturing our cube, which is our road, and then we have exponential as our point distribution. We then have dynamics. So again, our bridge is our collider, and our Voronoi Fracture is a rigid body dynamic. But the main thing here is, remember where we changed our trigger last time to be on collision? This is on at velocity peak. And what that means is we can control a slight change of something, whether it's position, rotation, or maybe scale. And then once that effect happens, the dynamics will be triggered. And so what's happening is we have a Plain Effector controlling the position by 0.1 centimeters. Then we have our freeze again, which does our growth. Our spherical field is here, which is what's controlling the start of this sort of like growth and this effect. And then we have a random field to, you know, create that nice random pattern. And so what's happening is, as this first area here starts to move based on that Plain Effector and based on those fields, our dynamics kicks in, and then our field grows and that area grows, and the dynamics kicks in on each of those bits. And so the rest of this, which is actually technically dynamic, isn't falling. It's just this bit here. So yeah, super very quick explanation of that one, but I will absolutely put that on the project files for you guys to just sort of like have a look, have a play, switch some things off, see what exactly is doing what on here.
That's awesome. Cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries. Do we have any questions on kind of like anything else, the previous fracture stuff, anything that people would like to know? I know we had a lot of like texture questions, and do not worry.
Yeah.
That is the aim for next week.
Yeah, the one that is the interesting one, which I think might have to be for next week, is the Voronoi fracture when it's transparent, and how to hide the cracks, how to stop being able to see them. I think you have to adjust the Voronoi so that it doesn't have any cracks, and then the next frame that it does. I think it's the only way I know how to hide in a transparent material.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Because yeah, they
But
are like
no,
separate
that's it.
pieces.
Yeah, and if you render it fractured, so the moment you apply a transparent material, you can see all the individual cracks before
Yeah.
they actually split apart. So the only way
Yeah.
I know is to cheat it one way or another.
Yeah. I'll have a think though, because that
Mm.
is it's interesting. Yeah.
Oh,
Anything
someone said,
else
no,
before
you
we
can do
kind
it
of
another way, but I'm assuming we're about to get an explanation. This should be cool.
Oh yes, go on.
Oh, yeah, okay. So he's going to let us know. Hold on. Ooh,
The
we're all in
suspense.
suspense. I know I've done it before, but it's been a while. And I know it's one of those things where I go, ooh, how do I
Mm.
do this? And one of my cats has joined me, finally.
Yeah, I guess whilst we are waiting for that response, maybe I'll talk about what's happening next week. So
Next
Jonathan,
week.
do not feel under pressure to rush. I can talk to people. You know me, I can talk. I can fill some time. Yeah, so next week, working with color. So a whole bunch of people had questions on how to work with vertex maps and change textures, and that is such a great topic. And the only reason we didn't talk about it today is because we want to spend some time talking about it next week, and that was the original plan anyway. So it's really great that you guys want to know how to do these different things. If you have any ideas in the meantime, like let us know. If you want to see some particular things, let us know. But yeah, the idea is we're going to be looking at how to set up different, let me just kick this off so we can see it, like how we can set up different color options inside of Cinema 4D. So if anyone doesn't know, we can actually take Vertex Maps and Vertex Map Color, and then we can use that inside of Cinema 4D and in particular inside of Redshift to control changes of textures, changes of like displacement and bump, and create some really advanced looking animated shaders. We can then, as Matt was showing with the you know, like the embossed handwriting, you could have the plain or the paper effectively be one color, and then what's being written on be a separate color. So we can do some really fun things with that. We can also do a lot of stuff with MoGraph color. So I know we didn't really do any like MoGraph Cloner setups as such today, apart from, you know, the Vertex map animating on the flowers and the grass. But we will look at setting up some MoGraph setups next week, and then how we can take advantage of MoGraph color. So where like a field may be, or where an effect is happening, we could have a different color or a gradient, and then we can use what's called color user data inside of Redshift. So a lot of this is going to be focused in Redshift materials. So that's sort of where we're going to be spending quite a bit of time next week, but it's going to be fine. It's going to be great. And it's going to be extremely interesting for everyone to see how we can take this data and we can really push our scenes and our animations and our renders to that sort of that next level by adding these color or texturing techniques. And then we'll also do some color blending inside of Redshift, because that's gonna be a lot of fun. Maybe I'll set up like a PSD file, show you how you can set up the layers, how we can blend different things together, and we can create some interesting materials. So whilst we're still waiting for, maybe still waiting for Jonathan, I can show what texture do I want to show. This one. What one have I got blending on? This one here. So yeah, we can look at sort of blending different materials together. So we have this sort of like grey rock material, then we have a gold material, and then we're using like texture and a ramp to blend it. We can use Maxon noises all inside of here to create some really fun looking textures. And with the new kind of surface imperfections that are coming out very soon / have just come out for Cinema 4D, we can start to create some fun stuff. Do we have a answer?
Not as yet, no. So I might just suggest, if he thinks of something, just to let us know and email us training@maxon.net.
Yes, let us know, training@maxon.net. Also, Drake, I've just seen you had some questions about color user data, etc. Send them to training@maxon.net. If anyone has some suggestions or ideas or stuff they'd like to see that are along those topics that we just sort of like talked about, then absolutely let us know. Like, we are more than happy to kind of tailor this for you guys, especially these last sort of 2 weeks.
Yeah. Cool. In which case, we will see you next week. Thank you for joining us. Sorry for my brain fade earlier. That was an interesting one to work
it's great.
through.
As everyone said, it's great to see the different ways of like problem solving, working things out. It's also great to see stuff when it doesn't work, because 9 times out of 10, people are going to come across these exact same issues, exact same kind of problems, just like we do. So it's always a good thing that happens in a live session. So
all right, take care, everyone. And
I was going to say, I hope everyone has a lovely rest of their week. Yeah, we'll see you on next week's session.
Right. Take care, all.
Bye, everyone.